Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Education in Crisis series. Tonight, we are having a recap of our first full year of COVID. And joining me tonight, my name is Marlene Tillman, Executive Director, co-founder of Gwinnett SToPP. Joining me tonight is Isaiah Thompson. He's a former Gwinnett student. He graduated last year, so he was all the way in the midst of the pandemic, and then had the experience of starting school as a freshman in the pandemic. So hopefully you'll enjoy this discussion. You can also add things to the chat and we'll try to respond to that as well. So let's get this show on the road. So in March 2020 is when we first started hearing about COVID, like endlessly, that it's here. It hit the West Coast. Cruise ships were being held in ports. Folks were not allowed to disembark. And then March 10th, Gwinnett County Schools sent out a letter to parents in the community stating that, yeah, we heard about this COVID thing, but we don't see it as a big deal. And that, we're watching it. However, there aren't any cases in Gwinnett, so we're just going to carry on. It's business as usual. But it wasn't really business as usual. And so on March 12th, they shared another communication. And as I came to understand, they were preparing to shut down on March 12th. And I was actually hanging out with you that day, Isaiah. We went to a meeting at the ISC, which is the Instructional Support Center, Gwinnett County Schools headquarters. And, the meeting went on as normal. Of course, Isaiah added some things to the mix, which I was very happy to have him and Faith there with me. And we went on home about our day. And Isaiah, you want to share any reflections for that day?
Yeah, it seemed like it was a really generic day or like another day. I remember going in there, we were talking to them about some of the things that we wanted to fix within the school systems, and a lot of things that I had known about but not really knew. And we had just finished talking to them about things, and got to learn a lot of things, and got to talk to some of the principals and supervisors of the system that I didn't know existed. But it was a really good meeting, and just another common day, or seems weird to say that now, but it was
I know, right?
It was an average day.
It was the last of our normal days, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I took you all back to your cars. And then we learned when we got home that, Gwinnett County Schools is shutting down. And they were announcing we're going all digital until further notice. Not only did the school shut down, the court started shutting down, venues started closing up. I mean, just everything was on a very quick shutdown mode. Okay. So now COVID is here. Boy, it rolled in with a vengeance. Everyone went all digital. The first thing that happened was the digital divide widened because we did go all digital. Many students didn't have equipment, devices, internet access, all of that. And that was laid bare. Gwinnett Schools has a $2.3 billion with a B, dollar budget. However, they were struggling in trying to provide devices for students who did not have a device to be digital, did not have internet access, did not have a they had it, they didn't have devices to get there. So it was just all kind of unfolding. Um, we also learned that our system had not prepared their infrastructure. As I said, we have a $2.3 billion budget and we have a $600,000 superintendent, but we had not invested in Chromebooks, devices, and infrastructure for the platform. Our own online systems could not handle it. Isaiah, did you have any problems connecting when everything went digital?
Um, by the grace of God, I didn't, but I knew a lot of friends and acquaintances who had struggles with getting a computer and then internet access. I think the pandemic made me realize just how, um, I guess, blessed I am, and also just how deep the divide was in terms of people who don't have access to a computer or don't have access to internet. For me, I could just go downstairs and get on the computer, but for some people, they didn't have that privilege, and I didn't realize that. And just kind of seeing that and kind of helping them. Sometimes we had to set up like calls with, like, for instance, my auntie. She had issues when it came to like getting a computer and internet access and stuff, so she had to come over here with us, and we were like helping my baby cousin and them with like their school things and like that. So it was a educational process in the sense of realizing how deep the divide actually was, because on an average day you don't really think that.
Did you find that EClass was stable? Was it crashing, from the Gwinnett County side?
um no, I know, like, before the pandemic, eClass was never perfect. um but during the pandemic it felt like we had different quizzes and things. It was a it was a learning curve, I think, for us as students and also for the teachers. um like, I had to take my final exam for my econ class, and I think there was like an issue with some of the questions. So we had to end up redoing it and doing it over again with different questions. So there were like different little, I guess, imperfections like that. But for the most part, for given the circumstances, I felt like it helped. It upheld. It was okay. Not perfect, but it was okay. It was good enough.
Right, right, right. And so Gwinnett did reluctantly get around to providing devices, but they provided like a Chromebook, but they didn't provide the internet access. So if the family still didn't have internet access, they still couldn't get online. Um, and the district just really started to understand that they had to also provide internet. They also tried printing out these packets, creating these packets for students that were created at a level outside of the school. So many teachers were not for that. That still wasn't really teaching children. It wasn't getting them with a person. So parents were pushing back on those packets as well. Gwinnett did put out a list of hotspot places in the community, but you had to sit in your car to do that. And so for parents who still, although it's a pandemic, were expected to report, that was an issue for parents who had lost their jobs very quickly. They couldn't use that time and drive around and spend the gas in doing that kind of thing of sitting in a parking lot for class. So it was a very, very clunky thing. Some households became food insecure. And so the Fed stepped in, and they made it very clear to school districts that the USDA, who funds the school lunches, for those who don't know, the US Department of Agriculture, could be used to prepare meals for off-site usage. And so schools started stepping up, and Gwinnett was one of them who stepped in finally, but they did a lot of clunky rules initially around who could have the meals and who couldn't, and USDA had to step in again and provide guidance to school districts and say, hey, we don't want people starving, and this food is going to go bad. You need to let whoever shows up at that school bus stop have the food, or whoever presents themselves at the school to have the food. And so that made things easier. And then there were community-based organizations who stepped in for sure and did a heavy lift in providing meals outside of what was provided as the to-go meals that were being done in the school, so that kids could still have hot meals. Of course, testing was affected. Testing was kind of thrown out the window, actually, except for those that were mandatory. The Georgia Department of Education applied for a waiver for the end of year testing, so that eliminated that. But Gwinnett County Schools had its own testing program that it had to let go of as well. Grades kind of went out the window too. Heard some things from teachers about not being allowed to fail students. Lots of students disappeared because they didn't have the access, and there wasn't really any tracing to see where students are or anything. Of course, as a senior, that was a huge challenge, right? You're trying to graduate, you want to have that graduation party. I'm with you on that, Isaiah. I felt cheated out of your graduation too. I was going to get adopted into the family and come. And so, all of that was kind of tough. How did you manage taking well, I know you had already taken your SATs, but like for AP classes, how did you manage those? Taking the tests for those?
Well, I think my second semester, I was a little burnt out with high school, and I think I had opted out to not take any AP exams. And that was before the pandemic. So that was great not to take the AP exams. But when it came to like end of the year tests, or just because we still had like a unit
right
when the pandemic hit, some of my teachers decided to keep pushing through, and acting like we weren't acting like it's just another day. We're gonna keep teaching, keep educating you guys. And in the moment, a lot of us were a little irritated, because it's just like, okay, we're online. This is weird. This is different. You can lighten up a little bit. But I appreciated them doing that, just for what I had to deal with this last year with being in college and being completely online. That was completely different experience.
How was
And
graduation?
well, we didn't get to have a graduation, which was it was a little rough. And I think, it was virtual, so they posted our picture on like a slideshow, and we got to see our name and our different awards. It's definitely an experience. It kind of, I don't know, the slideshow kind of diminished the experience for me. I was kind of like, okay, this is goofy. Just give me my diploma, and we'll just move on from there. And I think this year, because I still have some friends who were juniors at the time and are seniors now, they get to have a graduation. And I sometimes have to catch myself, to not get envious. But
right
we tried to make do with what we had. And my family got to come and see me with my my graduation paraphernalia and all that, and got to take pictures. So it was nice. Of course, we wish things could be different, but given the circumstances, I tried to make the most of what we had.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of students felt like you did that. That's a huge point in folks' lives, and we kind of look forward to the graduation and the celebration of that, and as a signal for a next step. And so I can understand why you'd be disappointed about that. I think a lot of the graduations have moved to the stadiums where they used to be.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, at the time that you graduated, that still wasn't safe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So thankfully, we're in a different point of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happened was um, the trauma of the moment, right? So trauma coming from all sorts of directions about the missed celebrations, not losing our connections to our families or having them shift very differently. And then for some people, they had the misfortune of losing their family members. So they're dealing with that. They may have been dealing with the parents' job loss and all sorts of things just being piled on top of it. So COVID just really laid bare the inequities that exist already in our society, and it just exploited them even further. So we made it through, right? We made it to the end of the school year. um, and we're trudging on. Is now May. We have to start making a plan for what the new school year looks like. And we were not unscathed, like, right, the trauma, the disconnections, um, lots of job loss that happened in this community as well, people getting sick. It just wasn't good. But we still have to think about, okay, so what's going to be next? We're in a world health pandemic. We still have to plan. We have children that need an education. Um, and so we have to just start looking at, this is our opportunity to really look at this from a different angle. But instead, Gwinnett spent a whole summer failing to plan, which comes out to planning to fail. Gwinnett only knew of 2 ways to hold school: in person or digital. What happened next was just showing GCPS short circuiting on thinking creatively. We have a superintendent that's been entrenched for 26 years, has no real ideas. He surrounds himself with people who will rubber stamp that. So therefore, anything creative that would have come out of there or could have is not encouraged. And so we ended up with the whole, we know 2 ways of doing this. We have a super that's paid over $600,000. I don't know why he can't think. But here we are. They could have actually thought creatively, right? They could have created a plan that included students being in and out on particular days, doing some kind of A/B scheduling so that they could minimize who's on the bus, they could minimize who's in the building, they could do some contact tracing if there was an outbreak. Students with disabilities could have been invited in during those break periods, bringing them in for support services. Um, Students who needed help and tutoring could have had a scheduling that went with that. They could have really taken this moment to think creatively, like get out of that same box. But again, you have Alvin Wilbanks entrenched for 26 years, and the only new ideas are the ones he's forced to have that someone else brings him. And so Gwinnett did this performative survey to see where parents were. Did they want their students in school? Did they want them doing face-to-face? Did they want to do digital learning? And Isaiah, you said you didn't experience a lot of issues on the, you experienced the usual issues on EClass, right? Lots of folks were having all sorts of difficulties with EClass. So it was just not a stable platform. They just weren't ready. They weren't ready. Taxpayers have spent a lot of money on the EClass, which is supposed to put in technology in the school. However, That's not what happened. I don't know where our EClass tax dollars went to, but it wasn't for beefing up EClass. It didn't go for putting better technology in our schools. It didn't go for Chromebooks for all the students. It didn't go to a lot of things that it's supposed to go to. So, but whatever. So they did this survey. It came back that some parents wanted face-to-face, some parents wanted digital, and then there were the group that wanted something that was in between, like, can't we do a mix of this? And Gwinnett decided in June, hey, we're going to do what we already know, right? Because it's too hard to think. And Gwinnett SToPP has sent them a plan, right, that another district actually thought about that was really creative, but they took that plan and they bastardized it somewhere down the line, okay? But they decided they were going to release this plan. We're going to go face-to-face and do digital. Now, mind you, at the time, Gwinnett cases were on the rise. During the summer, we ended up becoming #1 in the state for quite some time for new COVID cases. Thankfully, we did not get to be #1 in the state for deaths, but there are a lot of long-term consequences that happen to people who become sick with COVID. One of the things that went on, that after they did the announcement, the staff said, oh no, you cannot kill us. And so that started the whole flip-flopping. The staff had a protest. They marched over to the district, let people know that you just cannot put us on the front line like that, order us back in. We have health issues, our family members have health issues. That's just not something. At the time, there was not a vaccine that they could get. It was just not really a good situation. And the Gwinnett numbers were steadily rising. So, and with parents were, as I said with that survey, they were all over the place. For students with disabilities, the parents of students with disabilities really wanted some in-person learning. And Gwinnett could have thought creatively in a way to do that safely, but they did not. Parents who wanted to stay home, some weren't able to. So their students would have to go to face-to-face, but then they had a vulnerable family member at home. And so how did that happen? But there wasn't any, and meanwhile, the school districts around the state were looking at creative measures. Like Clayton was enlisting the community to help the parents who had to go to work to be able to provide a safe place for younger children to do the digital lessons. And they were calling in wherever they could call in a favor at, and wherever they could make a connection, they were looking to do it. And I remember a webinar that went on with Alvin Wilbanks and the superintendent of Clayton County Schools. And he's just coming up with, well, we went and made this connection and that connection, and we figure we can do this creatively this way. We can open the building up to do this in small numbers. And I mean, he had like a myriad of things going on about how they could do that. And Alvin Wilbanks sat there and said, well, we're going to do in person. and that was it. So, and he gets paid over $600,000, but whatever. I say, you have any thoughts on any of what I just said?
Speaking to some of my friends who are seniors now, and talking to them about their experiences over the course of the year, and like their relationship with their teachers, they definitely let me know on sometimes that fear of catching COVID, especially for the teachers. One of my favorite teachers, she was my physics teacher, and she was always like, you could tell that she had a passion for teaching. And she was pointing out to us how for some of the kids, you have some kids who like respect COVID and were like, I'm going to wear my mask. I'm going to, when I go home, I'm going to, wear my mask in the community, go straight to my house, do my work, blah, 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 but like respect the guidelines. And you had other kids who just didn't care. And that puts those teachers at risk. You have these teachers who genuinely care about students, genuinely care about educating these kids, despite the circumstances, yet you're putting them at a risk. You're essentially hurting them for the things that they love to do. And I think it definitely hurt the way I guess for me, I started to see or kind of sympathize with how teachers are portrayed within the community. I don't really think they get the respect they really do deserve, the amount of things that they have to put up with, whether that's with students or parents, in the sense being put out in the front lines in a pandemic, a deadly pandemic at that. You kind of you feel bad, and
they became frontline workers.
Yeah,
and that's not what they signed up for.
Not at all. Not at
So
all.
many professions turned into frontline workers, like our grocery store cashiers, and a lot of who turned into frontline workers were our lowest paid jobs. And when you stop to think about the value of work, they weren't paying enough for people to risk their lives. You can't get a life back. And they were barely surviving, and now they're frontline workers. And it's not something they all signed up for. And you're absolutely correct. There are a lot of teachers who really love what they're doing, and really wanted to figure out how to best help students. But this was not going to be it. And it's really hard to have to make that choice between what you love and then what you know to be safe, right?
Yeah, and even in college, during my first semester, my chemical professor, he had caught COVID, and he was still like, he wanted to try to teach. He was like, can't come into the building, into his specific classroom. He was telling us how, he had his wife at home, his 2 kids, wasn't trying to, he didn't want to obviously make them catch it as well. But, he was saying how he came into the building one day, went to go get his things because he liked to teach using like a platform inside the classroom. And one of the kids had come in there, without a mask. And he didn't think much of it, like obviously keep your 6 feet or whatever, but the kid had touched like the doorknob or something, whatever. And, like a week later, catches COVID, and there's a lot. And I think, especially within this country, we don't tend to think about the bigger picture. When someone catches COVID, it's not just that one person, it's their parents, if they have kids, their kids, cousins, family. You're talking about a whole network of people who you're putting in jeopardy. And I don't even know if at this moment in time, people really do or capture or actually like understand that, like, people are putting on a mask to protect you. I'm sitting here struggling to breathe under this mask, not only to protect myself, but to protect you. And I think it was definitely hard. It's a struggle for adults to do, and you can only imagine how big of a struggle it would be for young kids to do. And my heart goes out to all the teachers out there.
Absolutely agree. So after the teacher protests, they got through. Like Gwinnett announced a revised plan. It was the continuation of the flip-flop. So once they got the revised plan out, then we got the counter protesters, right? Ooh, does that look familiar? Something we saw recently? But the counter protest started about they don't want to be all digital. They want to be face to face. Came from a particular hue of minority parents. And so they were battling hard. They felt like teachers should come into the classroom. They should be there for their students. And besides, they had had enough of their kids at home. You heard that in the board testimony. They were like, get them out of my house, which was really interesting. I mean, I know parents feel that way from time to time. I don't think I would have gone into a public forum and said, please get my kids out of my house. I don't want to deal with them anymore. But they did. And so after all of the back and forth, Gwinnett comes out again. And so here we got Plan C, right? We went through A, we've been through B, we're now up to C. And Gwinnett goes back to, okay, we won't be all digital. We're going to do face-to-face and digital. And the staff said, no, we don't want to die. We don't want to die over a job. So they responded too, and let's check them out.
For the state's largest school district are protesting their plans for in-person learning.
Well, the first day of school in Gwinnett County is in just 6 days. CBS 46's Brittany Edney is live outside the school district's headquarters with some of their concerns for this upcoming school year. Brittany?
Well, Tracy and Sean, I'm sure you can hear a lot of that noise behind me. And what that is the sound of frustration from teachers and staff in the state's largest school district. They are saying and sending a message to officials within the district that, hey, we are fed up. We've been covering this topic ever since it started. And earlier this week, we shared with you the stories of some teachers who are so upset about the conditions that they're expected to work in that they say they had no other choice but to resign from their job. But I want to go over this reopening plan that was recently released by the district. First off, how this is going to work is the district is set to start the school year off virtually on August 12th and then phase students back in starting August 26th with kindergarten, 1st, 6th, and 9th grade, plus all special education self-contained classes. Then from there, the plan is to bring more grades back on a staggered basis with all students having the option of in-person learning by September 9th. Now, that is the most recent plan. Here's the thing, though. If you notice, we didn't say anything about staff and teachers, and that is because they are still expected to show up and teach on campus from those classrooms, whether it's digital learning or in-person going on, regardless. And from all the teachers that we've spoken to since covering this topic, they are upset because they say if students and families have the decision to go virtually, well, then they should have the decision to teach virtually. So that, again, is this huge turnout is for that protest. Reporting live in Gwinnett County, I'm Brittany Edney, CBS 46 News.
So the staff pushed back. Okay. And then after they did that protest, Gwinnett County Schools came out again and lied to the staff. They said, okay. If you have pre-existing health conditions, we're going to abide by ADA and the CDC recommendations that you're at home. But they didn't do that. So consequently, there were staff posting videos to YouTube. I forgot to pull them up so that we can look at that as well, about people who were suffering from cancer. They were in the midst of getting chemo treatments, and Gwinnett County Schools said, no, you cannot teach from your home. Now, mind you, teachers had done that from March through May. So they had demonstrated that it can happen. They needed, of course, the district needed to beef up the technology on the school end. However, it was very well possible. So staff were resigning. And it really became an all and out mess. And students mostly stayed out of this fray, with the exception of when they spoke out when one of the teachers was going to be disciplined for having a Black Lives Matter poster in their room, which is a whole nother thing. It goes back to the racism within Gwinnett County Public Schools. However, it was something that really shouldn't have happened, and teachers should not have been placed in that position. And the other thing that they got was that they were co-teach. They were also doing the concurrent teaching. So as teachers were teaching digital, they're also teaching in person when they return back to school. Isaiah, you got to miss that part, but I know you have siblings who were digital learners. Were any of their teachers doing both? Do you know?
I think for the most part, all of them were. It was you had a mixture of, especially towards the latter end of the school year, you had teachers who taught digitally, and then you had also those students that would come in person, that they would have to teach them as well.
One of the things that we heard about in the very beginning, and I said, oh, that's a one-off, is that the students who were face-to-face were actually sitting in front of a computer too, and the teacher was over in the side corner, whatever, teaching to the students face-to-face and digital learners from the computer at their desk that's in the room with the face-to-face students. And I thought that was a one-off when I first heard it. So I did some digging and intel. That was not a one-off. So even for the students who went back face-to-face, they didn't get the learning environment that they thought they were going to get. And again, this goes back to Gwinnett just failing to plan. Because Gwinnett failed to plan, because we were so unprepared and they're not creative, and we have an entrenched superintendent who does not do creativity, hasn't. I moved here in 2001. It was my first observation. But, because of all of that, it was a plan to fail. And so students, staff, and Gwinnett County families paid the price for all of that. And what we ended up doing was establishing 2 school districts in one again. So we just reinforced those inequities. So Wilbank's failure to plan just further reinforced class and race disparities and divisions in the district that the pandemic just exacerbated. And you layer on top of that we still were going through all of the shortfalls and everything else and the things that go with the pandemic, right? So, and they decided they were going to be in person and digital. There was still a Chromebook shortage going on. They were issuing Chromebooks, 1 to a family. Only, I believe it was around late December, early January, did they start even giving out devices to each student. They did finally catch up, and this is with our EClass money, mind you. They get a lot of money from EClass. We all paid a half penny. So they're collecting EClass. They received grants from other organizations to help buy these computers. However, they weren't able to buy them. In some cases, there was a shortage, but Gwinnett was behind the 8 ball from the beginning and took a very long time to catch up. The curriculum, the access was very clunky. I know the first day the students returned back to school, the platform crashed. And then they had a staggered schedule of being online for the digital learning, and even the teachers who were teaching in person. So they had a staggered schedule on when they could be on, because again, Wilbanks had not invested in our technology infrastructure. And so, again, we all paid the price for that. So access to curriculum was clunky. What I heard from parents is that the digital curriculum had not been adapted properly. So that summer that Wilbanks claimed they were planning, he didn't even plan to update the curriculum, because you just can't go online and teach classes the same way. That's not how curriculum works. And so it has to be done in a very different way to move from being an in-person delivery to a electronic delivery. And that was not done in too many cases. Staff was scrambling, trying to do it, and teachers are trying to learn how do you put together digital classrooms, right? Because that's a whole different skill set that many of them weren't prepared for. So then there was the staff shortage because they lied to teachers and staff about being able to work something out, and they didn't. Staff quit. We had a severe sub shortage. At one time, we were short over 2,000 subs. That's crazy. So when people were out for COVID, they were doubling up classrooms and sometimes tripling up classrooms. And APs and principals were having to cover the classes for teachers that are out. Gwinnett wasn't reporting the real numbers. And once they got the Gwinnett County Health Department on board with not reporting the school numbers of COVID, then they could say the numbers were whatever they were. But then they threatened staff not to report when they had COVID. And we got from one of the staff members that a co-teacher who tested positive for COVID was not allowed to tell the teacher she co-taught with in the same classroom because they didn't want that going out. Unfortunately, some staff died. We're aware of a paraprofessional and a bus driver, and Gwinnett has yet to even acknowledge that even happened. Thankfully they did finally get around to the internet stuff though. and district staff in the beginning was provided a mask and a few cleaning supplies and told them make do with that for the year, make it last, make it work. So, staff left. And it really created a substitute shortage. It created a staff shortage, a teaching shortage. Special education teachers are hard to get anyway. And that exasperated that situation. All of the lack of transparency of what was going on in the district is so true to form to what Alvin Wilbanks has done for his 26 years in the district. And so if you don't acknowledge even people's death, you're not acknowledging illnesses and you're not acknowledging that there's ever a problem because everything's great coming up rosy in the Gwinnett County school system, which is simply just not true. And through that, we talked before about, just the mental health is something that we really should be talking about and focusing on and preparing for when students come back. They have been through a lot in this last year and a half. Teachers have been through a lot in this last year and a half. Parents have been through a lot. And so we really need to be mindful of how we represent and how we, what services and supports that we're providing to people. But sadly, I learned of some counseling sessions that were going on online with the students. However, that just wasn't enough because Gwinnett County Schools does not have enough mental health counselors, within their ranks, and they did not apparently contract with any to get extras within the district so that students would have access to that. And so that definitely comes under the failing grade. And so when we really, really think about the good thing, let me name a good thing, meal delivery continued. And so meal delivery definitely continued. And we're back at the acknowledging that students have a lot to make up for in what they missed in learning loss, services, support, just all of that. So moving forward, we need solutions. The first thing we need to acknowledge, it is a world health pandemic, and we have to treat it as such. So PPE, contact tracing, and sharing real world conditions to what's going on in our schools has to be part of it. It has to be a transparent process of what's going on in the health so that we can really make a plan and have plans for when there is an outbreak. What does that look like and how do we mitigate it from spreading through a building? Because COVID's not disappearing. I mean, we have vaccines now. However, it's not going anywhere for a while. Having vaccines and having people vaccinated are two very different things. Georgia is near the bottom of the states with the number of people vaccinated. We're at about 34%. There have been some creative things happening lately to try to get those numbers up, and hopefully they will go up. But right now it stands at 34%. And that doesn't say that 34% of teachers are vaccinated or people in the school are vaccinated. So we really have to be mindful of that. Many students have experienced learning loss, and thanks to the federal funds that are happening right now, they will, and the set-asides that were put for some of the money, students will be able to have a summer learning experience. The really positive thing that makes Gwinnett SToPP feel good is that the district is starting to use the words social emotional learning. I'm not clear though that they really know what that means, but at least they're saying it. So somebody's going to get them a dictionary and we're all going to hold them, for those who know what it is, we're going to hold them accountable to really taking that into account and ensuring that it's woven throughout the curriculum, throughout the school climate, where it should be. And oh, FYI, and social emotional learning is about the adults in the building too. So how do we get that infused through our schools, which would be great. And so GCPS has announced that it is going in the fall, going to open in person, face-to-face. They still will have a digital option. The good news is that teachers will not be teaching concurrently again. That was a huge thing with parents for sure, and with staff. So I'm sure, let me speak on behalf of parents, staff, students. Yay! So those who are teaching digital will only be teaching digital learners, and those who will be teaching in person will only be teaching in-person learners. So that's a big plus. And the school board is seeking a new superintendent. You know, I kept saying that, entrenched 26-year superintendent. Yeah. So, and the end of July, he will be leaving. We are in the midst of a superintendent search. We should have one by then. And we're hoping that that person brings some very new, fresh ideas, has the ability to think outside of the box, values and includes the whole community, also values and respects people from different backgrounds, and understand that every child has the right to an education, every child. And a must, I hope the school board takes a moment to listen to this, but do not make sure that we get someone who does not refer to students with disabilities as the albatross around the district's necks. So, you know, we definitely need a different kind of superintendent. And so one that welcomes diversity and inclusion and understands what that is. And so what we really need is a real plan. These are just some basic things. You know, it's a no-brainer that teachers with compromised immune systems should be allowed to work at home, right? Real cleaning plan. We heard a lot about cleaning that wasn't happening. We need to take some of that ARPA money and use it on air purifiers for our building, being able to do the air exchange that planes do, and be able to really keep the building down from being the COVID hotspot by being able to change out our air filters and supplies and things like that. That is so very important to do. And then just you know, can we check on each other, right? Can we really think about this from a human perspective? We are in a very unique time in the world. This is a great time to really reimagine education for longer term than just the next school year. Currently, our current superintendent put together a strategic, what does he call it? A strategic direction. That is not a strategic plan. And a 2.3 billion with a B dollar budget deserves a strategic plan. Anyone making over $600,000 should understand the value of a strategic plan, which means you have goals you meet and measurable goals. Okay, and you look to see when you meet them, and how do you make up for those that you don't? So we have a unique time. This would be a great time to do that. At the very least, COVID's going to be with us for a minute. We need at least a 3-year plan that looks at holistically dealing with COVID, learning loss, and then what does education look like nowadays? Are we always going to have this model of face-to-face, digital, da-da-da-da? We have to widen our lens when we're looking for solutions. Clayton County's school superintendent was great with what he was doing in reaching out to his community and see who's got what, and how can you plug in to support our students, because it does take a village. And so anything the school system blocks out, and doesn't get support from the community, that's a problem that they're going to have to fix, and they're not going to be fully equipped to do that, but they will own it then because they will have blocked out everyone else. Again, we need a bigger focus on mental health. That may be the plus that came out of the pandemic, is that people now understand how important mental health is, and to have those check-ins and to do self-care and to care for others. This has been a very challenging, trying time. Students are not going to just snap out of that. Adults are going to just snap out of it, and we're just going to go on with life. We have to understand that this is something that, has impacted people deeply. And we need to be mindful of that. Is there, you got anything to add? I've been talking a lot.
I think specifically on mental health, I think especially when it comes to reimagining education, that's something the Gwinnett County Public Schools definitely needs to focus on. And I think the education system as a whole, this year, having being virtual in college for my entire first year, and then ending my senior year online, it's been rough to say the least. To I guess change the way you learn. You're so used to, if you have a question, you just walk up to the teacher's desk, and now you kind of have to wait until you see them in a virtual class setting, send messages through them in a chat to them in the chat box, or set up a meeting with them through an email. It's not as immediate as we want, and kind of also learning how to teach yourself. It was definitely a skill that I didn't have, and it's something I've had to kind of work on through this pandemic to really just to continue to be successful and get by. But I think one way I would love to see Gwinnett solve like mental health would just be to redefine what we call success. When I hit college, I had to learn how to, I guess, be okay with quote unquote failing, but like not everything is going to be easy. I'm not going to get 100 on a test every time. And in high school, I was used to getting an A and saying like, oh yeah, I'm smart. I can I'm going to be fine. I'm going to do this. And when I finally did fail, I struggled, and it was terrible. It was a terrible time for me. And I know that there's a bunch of other students within Gwinnett County specifically who are there pursuing this, like this grade number and this average, when we should really just be pursuing this desire to learn, growing. No matter if you start out with a C in a class and you get at the end of the semester, as long as you grew, whether that's you having a B or an A, that's success. And I would really love for the school system just to instill that within students, because you have students who are killing themselves, losing sleep for a grade number, and they try to apply this, then they try to apply that same logic to college, where it's not just memorization. You have to apply concepts, and we wonder why we struggle. And I wondered why I struggled when I got to college. I would really love them to, change the curriculum in that aspect, giving CP and honor students and gifted students, to an extent, the same kind of teaching that they give AP students, in terms of like applying those concepts, not just memorizing a study guide, looking at tests and saying who was the 15th president. That's not the real world at all, and it's setting people up for failure. I would definitely love to see that just changed. And I think this year hopefully has told everyone, the importance of mental health and counselors. I would love to see them expand the amount of counselors that they have, because specifically at this high school that I was at, there's a lot of students at that high school, and we only had like 3 or 4 counselors. And I didn't meet my counselor until my last year. And, to some of you listening, that may be a surprise, but there's a lot of other students who didn't meet the counselor until the second semester of senior year, when we were talking about where we're going to go to college, SAT, ACT, that kind of stuff. But yeah, those are really just the big major things. I would
But
love
those
to
were
see.
academic counselors, Isaiah. Those weren't even the ones who do counseling, clinical, who are clinical counselors, who are doing the counseling around mental health. They're not them.
Either way, there needs to be
Right.
some
We
form of,
don't have
some
enough of
form
those.
focus. Yeah.
Those are shared across the cluster. The ones who do
Yeah.
mental health are shared across the cluster.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
shouldn't be. That should not be. And I'm with you. I think the more we talk about it, the less taboo it is, and folks get to understand that it's not just them. And I talked to you when you were first starting school for college, and I kept saying to you, what are you learning? And it took you a minute to understand what I was asking.
Yeah.
That what are you learning? Can you apply what you learn? Do you own that knowledge? And so often we teach for a test, and not for the experience and the joy of just learning, and, as you said, growing.
Being able to say that you know this topic by like your hand, like I have gained this new understanding of just an education and how beautiful it is. I can sit in a room with another person and understand what they're talking about. Like, that's amazing, and whenever I talk to some of my like friends that are still in high school, I try to tell them, go beyond what they're talking about. Go beyond just the slideshow and the notes that you see. Try to really grasp what you're talking about. You can teach it to try to teach it to someone or something like that, just so you can grow. Because at the end of the day, it's not about a ranking. It's not about a grade number. It's not about any of those things. And I can honestly say I was in the top 10 in my class, and there were students who had a lower ranking than me, and I would, in that time and day, look at them and say, "Well, I'm smarter." No, not at all. Not at all. Because for those students who may have had a B average, they were learning. I was memorizing.
Right.
you know, and yeah. So I apologize for going on a bit of a tangent, but I think that's the big thing I learned over the course of this year. Just especially that
Learned how to
aspect of,
learn.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It wasn't a tangent. It does need to be K-12 education does need to shift. And there does need to be a focus on just learning, the joy of learning, owning the knowledge, applying the knowledge. And then you're able to do other things with that knowledge, right? Because you can apply it to different things where it fits. You'll see where it fits in other places. So that's always a good thing. And so this is how you contact us. Isaiah, I've so enjoyed you joining me tonight with us. It's been a great conversation. Maybe reflect a little more too, I think. But this has been really, really good. But you can reach out to us through email info@Gwinnett SToPP, our website. You can follow us on various social media channels. We are looking for volunteers, and we're soon going to announce some internships that are opening up with the organization. So stay tuned for that. And Isaiah, you have anything you want to add in here?
Just thank you for the opportunity to express my opinions and sit with you and talk about these topics. Always a
Well, it's my pleasure. Look, I'm gonna rope you into it again sometime. See, be careful what you say here. You know who I am. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And with